Picture a world that slumbers not in silence, but in rhythm with nature's breath. A world where nights are darker, longer, and filled with sounds modern ears have long forgotten. The creaking of timber beams overhead, the sighing wind slipping through thatched roofs, the slow, even breathing of cattle housed beneath wooden floorboards. This is not a dream. This is the Middle Ages. Tonight, we're taking a gentle journey back through time, not to the grand courts of kings, nor to battlefields of glory, but into something far more intimate, the way people slept. Forget the image of luxurious featherbeds and billowing canopies. For most people in the medieval world, sleep was a humble affair, functional, communal, often uncomfortable, and always governed by the cycle of the sun and the pulse of the seasons. And yet, it was sacred, even holy. Rest was a time not only for the body to repair, but for the soul to commune, for dreams to guide decisions, for omens to whisper in silence. In this quiet journey, we'll slip past the thresholds of stone cottages and manor halls, inns and monasteries, to explore how medieval people prepared for bed, what they slept on, how they positioned themselves, and even how they understood the mysterious land of dreams. We'll uncover beliefs both practical and mystical, the textures of bedding and straw, the warmth of shared bodies, and the peculiar rhythm of first and second sleep. So find a soft place to rest. Let your eyes grow heavy, your thoughts slow, like melting wax. We are stepping gently into a time when sleep was a fragile, sacred threshold between the known and the unknown. This is forgotten history for sleep, and this is how people slept in the Middle Ages. Imagine you are lying not in a bed, but on a lumpy wool-stuffed mattress atop a wooden board, or maybe even just on straw. The smell of smoke from the hearth clings faintly to your blanket. Your feet are cold. The wind slips in through gaps in the walls. A dog is curled near your legs for warmth. Somewhere above, a loft groans beneath the weight of hay and hens. And beside you, your siblings, or your spouse, or a stranger passing through the village. You haven't just drifted off in one long, uninterrupted slumber. No, this is the medieval night. And sleep comes in two parts, a first sleep and a second sleep, separated by an hour or more of wakeful stillness. In that gap, what we now call the midnight hour, you may whisper a prayer, make love, stir the fire, or consult a dream you just had. You see, in the Middle Ages, sleep wasn't just rest. It was a ritual, a reflection of your place in the world, socially, spiritually, even physically. Where you slept, how you slept, and who you slept beside told a story all its own. In castles, nobles slept on raised platforms and curtained beds, sometimes sharing the room with dozens of servants on pallets nearby. In monasteries, monks slept in silence and rose, their habits doubled as nightwear. In inns, strangers slept shoulder to shoulder. In homes of peasants, the bed might be a pile of heather, a blanket, and the warmth of a cow beneath the floorboards. And then there were the sounds. The night wasn't quiet. It was alive. Owls, distant dogs, the creak of old timber, the occasional shuffle of rats. And yet, people found rest here. True rest. Perhaps even more deeply than we do now. We've forgotten so much of what it meant to sleep when sleep was tied to the land, the stars, the church bell, and the flicker of firelight. But tonight, we remember. Let's begin. Imagine it is evening. The sun has vanished beneath the western hills, leaving only the faintest brush of golden haze on the clouds. Shadows stretch long across fields. The final clatter of tools is silenced as the day exhales. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell tolls vespers, and so begins the slow, deliberate preparation for the medieval night. There were no bright electric lights, no late-night screens, no sudden bursts of digital color. When night fell in the Middle Ages, it fell completely. The world turned dim and soft, lit only by the uncertain glow of hearth fires, oil lamps, and beeswax candles, precious, expensive things that most peasants rarely owned. The day had been hard. Whether you were a farmer returning from the fields, a washerwoman wringing out the final sheet, a child who'd fetched water from the well, or a monk who'd spent the afternoon copying scripture by candlelight, your body was tired. But before bed, there was ritual. Slow, earthy, physical ritual. In the peasant home, a small timber or stone structure, often just a single room shared by the entire family. Preparing for sleep meant tending first to the fire. The hearth, after all, was life. Its warmth carried the home through bitter nights. A child might be sent to poke the embers and stack in new wood, while the mother stirred a final pot of broth, whispering thanks to God for the food. The father might remove his worn leather boots, place them beside the door, and dust off his rough-spun tunic. There was no privacy, no separate bedrooms. Everyone saw, everyone heard. It was a communal life. You might sleep in the same room as your siblings, your grandparents, even your livestock, tucked below the floorboards or separated by low partitions for shared warmth. Before lying down, you might kneel briefly. Prayer was woven into the rhythm of life. A child might mumble a simple line, "Bless us, O Lord, and keep us through the night." A monk in a cloister miles away might be reciting the full Compline prayer, his words echoing in the cool stone chapel, reverent and hushed. Even thieves and drunkards might mutter a quick cross over their chest, unsure of whether they'd wake again at all. There was always a certain solemnity to the night. Sleep was not guaranteed. The world was full of uncertainty, illness, fire, spirits, some whispered, demons that crept in dreams. So people did what they could to usher in the night gently, to court sleep like an old cautious friend. Clothes were removed, though not always. Many slept in their undertunics or simply in what they wore all day. The wealthy might change into nightrobes of finer linen. A noble woman might unbraid her hair and brush it by the candlelight, humming softly to herself. A servant girl would lay out her mistress's bedding, fluffing the mattress of straw and feathers, perhaps lighting incense if they could afford it. But for most, sleep came on simple beds, a mat of heather, a pile of rushes, a low wooden platform with a bundle of straw and a coarse woolen blanket. If you were lucky, there'd be a second blanket, heavier, warmer. Families huddled together, limbs tangled not from affection, but from necessity. In the cities, preparations were a bit more complicated. Inns offered travelers a shared bed, or at least space beside strangers. You might pay a few pence to sleep four to a mattress, elbow to elbow. And yet, there too, a sort of nighttime rhythm emerged. Boots came off. Bread crusts were tucked away for morning. Candles were snuffed. Jokes softened into murmurs. Eventually, even the raucousness died down into breath and stillness. In castles, preparation for sleep followed the rituals of rank. The bedchambers of the noble class were grand. Heavy drapes, carved wooden beds, feather-stuffed mattresses, but they were not private in the modern sense. Servants might sleep in corners. Torches flickered. Dogs padded across the floors. Ladies-in-waiting helped their mistresses undress, and brought warmed stones to tuck into the bedding. But no matter your class, your place, your religion, or your labor, all prepared for sleep with the same hopes: warmth, safety, and the promise of waking again. There were scents to remember too: the scent of smoke that clung to everything, the faint sweetness of lavender stuffed into pillows to deter lice, the musky, earthy smell of sweat and straw and old timber. To us, it might feel uncomfortable. To them, it was simply home. A final cup of ale or warmed milk might be passed. Stories might be told. Old tales, half remembered. Sometimes, someone might recite a psalm or hum a lullaby, and slowly, eyes would grow heavy. People in the Middle Ages understood that night was both an ending and a beginning, that to sleep was to hand oneself over to something unknown, a kind of death. And so they prepared with humility, with reverence, sometimes with fear, sometimes with gratitude, always with intention. Let yourself imagine it now. You're lying on straw, wrapped in coarse wool. The fire has burned down low. The sounds of your family's breath surround you. Outside, the wind rattles the shutters. You have done all you can for the day. What remains is sleep. Let it take you gently. To sleep in the Middle Ages was not just to lie down. It was to lie into something, into materials, into smells, into warmth or cold, into a world made not of foam and springs, but of what the earth and animals provided. There was no one kind of bed. Instead, there was a wide spectrum, ranging from woven mats laid directly on hard-packed dirt to canopied frames dressed in tapestries and fur. The difference between these was more than luxury. It defined your place in the world. Let's begin with the simplest of beds, the humble straw pallet. For peasants, the bed was often nothing more than a bag or bundle of straw laid on the floor. This straw might be gathered from wheat or barley stalks after harvest, dried and stuffed into rough linen sacks known as pallets. These sacks were coarse. They rustled when you moved, and they attracted all sorts of guests: mites, mice, lice, and fleas. But still, it was better than sleeping on the naked ground. Every few weeks, the straw had to be changed. By then, it would be flattened, smelly, or beginning to rot. It was one of those quiet chores, often left to the youngest children or elderly. New straw meant better sleep. So for that one evening, the household might sigh with genuine comfort as they lay down. There was also the tick mattress. Not tick, like the insect, though ironically, those two made appearances. But tick, as in a tightly woven case stuffed with straw, feathers, or rags. The better the tick, the softer the bed. Now, imagine being wealthy, or nobility. Your bed was likely a large wooden frame, often ornately carved and standing tall above the floor to avoid drafts. A wooden platform might be strung with leather or rope lattices, crossed and woven tightly. This base supported a large mattress, and upon that, more layers: feather beds, wool blankets, fur throws. Beds could become elaborate. Some had 4 posts with heavy curtains that could be drawn shut. These weren't just for privacy. They helped trap body heat during the frigid winters. Entire families, or at least a noble couple and their closest servants, might sleep behind those curtains, whispering in the velvet dark enclosure. Pillows, too, told a story of class. The average peasant had no pillow at all. If they were lucky, they might fold up a tunic or stuffed straw into a small cloth sack. Nobles, meanwhile, had cushions filled with feathers or horsehair. Some even added herbs: lavender for calm, rosemary for protection, sage for cleansing the air. But beyond materials, what truly defined a bed in the Middle Ages was who you shared it with. Co-sleeping was the rule, not the exception. Entire families often shared one bed, parents with children, grandparents, sometimes even farmhands or guests. Warmth was more important than privacy. Space was scarce. In taverns and inns, travelers who had never met before might find themselves tucked in side by side, sometimes two or three to a bed. It might sound strange to us now, but this sharing was deeply embedded in medieval life. Even the English language reflects it. The phrase sleeping with someone once referred literally to sharing a sleeping space, not necessarily a romantic act. And in monasteries, the sleeping arrangements reflected vows of order and humility. Monks slept in dormitories, lying side by side on simple wooden planks or hay beds, all facing the same way. No talking, no comfort, just silence and the rustle of cloth. For servants or apprentices, sleep came in odd corners, near hearths, in lofts, beside the animals. They made do with what space they could find. One might wrap in a cloak and curl on a bench. Another might lie near the dogs for warmth. Children were nestled in with siblings or placed closest to the parents for protection. It wasn't uncommon to sleep near animals. In rural homes, livestock lived under the same roof, separated only by a low wooden barrier. Cows, pigs, and chickens offered extra warmth in the night. Their breathing and shifting were part of the evening's ambient soundtrack. For the wealthy, beds were statements. They were often moved from room to room. Some were so elaborate that they traveled with their owners, disassembled, packed, and reassembled like a prized possession. They were symbols of station, carved with family crests, inlaid with gold, or painted with religious scenes. Sleeping in such a bed must have felt like lying inside a declaration of power. But even so, the experience of sleep was not only about the physical bed. It was about the atmosphere, the smells, the air, the darkness. Rooms were cold. Insulation barely existed. Walls might be stone or timber, and windows, if there were any, were either open to the elements or sealed with oiled cloth or wooden shutters. Blankets were precious. People slept fully dressed in winter, sometimes even wearing gloves and hats. And yet, sleep came. Deep, dreamless, earned sleep. Because days were long, labor was hard, and at night, bodies needed restoration. There is something comforting in the simplicity of it. No expectations of perfection. No ideal mattress firmness. Just a bundle of straw, a borrowed blanket, and a soul so tired it could sleep through anything. So, close your eyes now. Imagine the texture of rough wool against your skin, the sound of your brother's breath beside you, the scent of straw, the cold of the night air. You're safe. You're home. You have a place to sleep. That is enough. Imagine this. You lie down after a long day. The room is dark. A blanket of silence has fallen over your village or your manor house. You sleep, but not until morning. Instead, you wake in the middle of the night, not startled, not disturbed, but calmly, as if your body expected it. You sit up. Maybe you light a candle. You pray, or you whisper. You stir the fire, sip water, speak to your partner in low voices. And then, after an hour, maybe two, you return to bed. You sleep again, until dawn. This wasn't insomnia. This was normal. In the Middle Ages, people followed a sleep pattern now mostly forgotten. It was called segmented sleep, or first and second sleep. This idea isn't modern speculation. It's documented in letters, journals, medical texts, and literature from the medieval world. People referred to first sleep as something understood by everyone. It began shortly after dusk and typically lasted until around midnight. Then came a waking period, called the watch, followed by a second sleep that lasted until daybreak. So why did they wake in the night? Because life was different. Night wasn't a void to be rushed through. It was part of a rhythm, rich with meaning and possibility. Artificial lighting was minimal. People went to bed soon after sunset, often sleeping by 7 or 8 p.m. By midnight, the body, already rested, would stir. And here, in the dark and quiet center of the night, something special unfolded. In this space between sleeps, the world felt altered. The air was cooler, the light dim. Time slowed. Some people used this time for prayer. Monks and devout laypeople considered it sacred. They lit a candle or knelt by their straw beds, whispering to the heavens. In monasteries, matins, a midnight prayer service marked this moment, anchoring the monks' nights in ritual. Others might rise to tend animals, check the hearth, or simply stretch their legs. A mother might breastfeed or check on her children. A father might repair a tool by the fire. And for couples, this in-between time offered privacy. Medical texts from the period even recommended it as the ideal moment for intimacy. It was quiet. Bodies were rested, minds free from the burdens of the day. There were even specific terms. In 13th century France, people spoke of premier sommeil and second sommeil. In England, it was common to say, "I'll return to second sleep." And interestingly, dream journals from the time mention visions coming more vividly in second sleep, a belief that the soul, having been briefly unanchored, returned to its body with messages. But why have we forgotten this? The shift came gradually. By the late 17th and 18th centuries, the invention of artificial lighting, especially the street lamp and then gaslight, began to stretch the evenings. People stayed up later, fell asleep later, and slowly, segmented sleep disappeared. By the time electric lighting became common, the notion of waking in the night was reclassified as a problem: insomnia, sleep disorders. But in the Middle Ages, waking up at midnight didn't mean something was wrong. It meant the night was still going. So next time you wake in the darkness, don't panic. You're not broken. You're medieval. You are echoing a pattern that human beings followed for centuries. A time when sleep was not a flat stretch of unconsciousness, but a breathing, living rhythm of silence and return. And perhaps, just perhaps, there's something beautiful in that. A message waiting in the stillness. A thought that couldn't rise during the day. A peace found only in that pocket of waking. Sleep was once not a barrier but a bridge. A sacred pause between the pulses of life. And in that second sleep, beneath the weight of wool and the hush of the night, humanity dreamed its most honest dreams. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. It is the middle of the night. You are lying beneath rough wool blankets, the only light in your cottage a pale gleam from the moon slipping through the cracks in the shutter. Outside, the wind stirs the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, once, then silence. And then, your dream begins. In the Middle Ages, sleep was not just rest. It was a portal, a spiritual passage, a moment when the veil between worlds, they believed, grew thin. People in the medieval world didn't just dream. They listened to their dreams. They interpreted them, feared them, trusted them. Dreams were seen as divine messages, omens, or sometimes visitations. For most medieval people, dreams were not random firings of the brain. They were communications, from angels, from devils, from saints, or even from the souls of the dead. You see, theology and folklore ran side by side. To dream of fire, a warning of sin. To dream of birds, a journey or a message. To dream of teeth falling out, trouble in the family. And then there were dreams so vivid, so strange, that they required immediate action, a pilgrimage, a donation, or in some cases, an exorcism. The church often claimed authority over dreams. Certain orders of monks, like the Benedictines, believed dreams were part of God's language. Saint Benedict himself reported powerful visions in the night that helped him discern God's will. But there was always a warning. Dreams could deceive. The devil, they said, could whisper in dreams, wearing the face of someone you loved. This is why many slept with religious charms. Wooden crosses under pillows, relics by the bed, or psalms whispered before the eyes closed. Just as modern people lock their doors, medieval people locked their spirits with prayer. And if they woke suddenly from a nightmare, they would not merely turn over, they would pray. In some households, it was common to keep a small bowl of holy water near the bedside to sprinkle if sleep turned sour. Because nighttime was not only sacred, it was vulnerable. There were creatures of the dark, they believed. Spirits, demons, and strange things that crept into homes through cracks and dreams. Some tales spoke of the Mara, a being who sat upon your chest as you slept, stealing your breath. Others feared incubi or succubi, spirits said to visit sleepers to tempt or torment. Night terrors were not just bad dreams. They were spiritual attacks. And what we now call sleep paralysis, in medieval times, it was seen as possession. The feeling of being frozen in bed, unable to move, often with a weight on the chest or a figure in the room, was not physiological. It was a sign that you were under assault by something unseen. So families developed rituals. Children were taught night prayers from the moment they could speak. Now, I lay me down to sleep. Except, in the medieval world, the phrasing was often more urgent. Deliver me from the shadow that walks. Shield me, O Lord, from the breathless dark. Keep the fiend from my dreams and the pit from my soul. To us, they sound dramatic, but to them, they were survival. Interestingly, some people documented their dreams. Small scraps of parchment with drawings or notations, what we might call a dream journal. Physicians, too, paid attention. In the Trotula, a famous medieval medical text written in southern Italy, it suggested that dreams could point to imbalances in the body. Too much black bile, too much heat. Sleep revealed the illness before the body did. And yet, despite the fears, many saw sleep as a gift. A night without dreams could be suspicious. Dreams meant the soul was still listening. So what does this tell us? That medieval people didn't separate the physical from the spiritual. To sleep was not to rest, but to cross into another realm. A place where angels walked barefoot across the thatch, where saints whispered truths, where devils might try their tricks. The body rested, but the spirit traveled. And in the quiet dark of the Middle Ages, wrapped in linen, lying on straw, listening to the creak of wood and the breath of family nearby, people surrendered to that mystery every night, because in that darkness came messages, sometimes fearful, sometimes holy, but always believed. Now, take a slow breath. Imagine the medieval world again, this time not in the abstract, but in its full, divided form. A world where sleep meant different things, depending on where you laid your head. In a noble house, sleep was a display of power. The bed was often a grand thing, raised high off the floor, with carved posts and thick feather mattresses stuffed with goose down. Velvet drapes and canopies served not only to impress, but to keep in warmth during cold nights. Embroidered sheets, sometimes perfumed, were smoothed by handmaidens before sleep. A noble couple might sleep apart in separate rooms, or share the same vast bed, depending on fashion or marital arrangement. And within these rooms, there were servants, footstools, warming pans of coal placed under the sheets, and a level of privacy that most could only imagine. But step outside that manor, beyond the gates, into the flickering lantern-lit alleys of the village, and things were different. In a peasant's home, often one room shared by everyone, sleep was a communal act. Children, parents, grandparents, even guests might lie shoulder to shoulder on sacks of straw, covered in wool or patched linen. There were no beds, not in the way the nobles had them. Instead, there were pallets, simple mats filled with hay spread on the packed earth floor. Sometimes a bench, sometimes just a folded cloak, and sometimes, especially during harvest or travel, people simply slept in barns or on grass, under the open stars, listening to the snort of oxen beside them or the rustle of mice near the walls. But here's the thing. Sleep may have looked different across class lines, but the need was the same. Rich or poor, noble or laborer, all sought the same comfort when darkness fell: warmth, safety, and rest. What separated them, perhaps more than bedding, was access to peace. The poor often worked until they dropped, rising with the sun, pushing through fatigue. The noble could sleep long, be shielded from worry. But even they, despite their curtains and feather beds, were not immune to bad dreams or cold drafts or spiritual fears that crept in with the moon. In every corner of the medieval world, sleep was a mirror of status, of comfort, of belief, and of longing. Even now, centuries later, as we lie in our modern beds, memory foam, electric blankets, silk sheets, or simple cotton, we carry echoes of that time. We still tell bedtime stories. We still keep night lights. We still toss and dream and whisper to ourselves before sleep, because at the edge of sleep, something ancient waits, a hush, a vulnerability, a hope that tonight we'll rest. And maybe, just maybe, we'll dream of something worth remembering. So now, dear listener, the fire has burned low, the wind has quieted, and this long journey, through flickering candles, straw-stuffed mats, and noble canopies, has come to its end. What does it leave us with? Not just facts, not just images, but a sense of connection. Because sleep, more than anything else, is something we all share. Across time, across class, across belief. In the Middle Ages, they feared it, worshipped it, used it to speak with saints and reckon with spirits. And in many ways, so do we. Our anxieties, our rituals, our midnight prayers, they're not so different. We close our eyes, hoping to forget some things and remember others. Hoping for peace, for silence, for rest. So as you drift now, carried gently by the tide of sleep, know this: you are not alone. From candlelit huts to stone castles, through plagues and prayer, through dreams and dust, people have always sought this same soft space, this moment, this quiet, this sleep. Good night, and may your dreams carry you gently, always.